Today we're diving into a really provocative argument. This idea that the economy is waging a silent war on your wealth. We're going to explore the hidden mechanics of what our source material calls state wealth transfer. So, let's jump right in.
Okay, let me ask you something. You ever have that feeling, you look at your bank account, the number might even be going up, but what you can actually buy with it, it just feels like it's shrinking? It's like your money is just quietly melting away, like an ice cube on a hot day. You know that feeling? Yeah, that's what we're talking about today.
Well, according to the source we're exploring, that feeling isn't an accident. Not at all. It makes a really bold claim that this is all part of a deliberate plan to transfer wealth. A pretty wild idea, right? So let's see exactly how they lay out that argument.
So to really get a grip on this modern-day concept, the argument actually takes us way, way back in time. We're talking ancient Rome. Because believe it or not, they were running a version of this trick in a much more physical, hands-on kind of way. Yeah, the basic idea here is that the Roman Empire pretty much wrote the playbook on this stuff. They got really, really good at what's called currency debasement, which is just a fancy way of saying they deliberately lowered the value of their money to pay their bills. And it's such a great physical example for us to wrap our heads around before we tackle the more abstract way it happens today.
And the process they used? It was just brilliantly simple. Almost like a magic trick. Okay, so step 1. The state collects all these pure silver coins from the people through taxes. Step 2. They melt them all down. Step 3. They mix in cheaper metals, stuff like copper. And then, the final step, they remint the coins. But here's the kicker. They could now make more coins than they started with. And just like that, boom, they could fund their armies, build massive projects, all with money they basically created out of thin air, using the people's own silver to do it. So you, the average Roman citizen, you get a coin back that looks and feels pretty much the same, but its actual silver content, its real intrinsic value, is way lower. Now, it took a while, but eventually people would catch on. They'd realize it was taking more and more of these new debased coins to buy, say, a loaf of bread. Does that sound at all familiar?
Okay, so that's the ancient history lesson. But it brings up a really obvious question, right? We don't use silver coins anymore. I mean, our money is paper, and most of the time, it's not even that. It's just numbers on a screen. So how on earth could this ancient Roman trick have anything to do with our lives in the 21st century?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. The source argues that the exact same principle is still at play today. It's just evolved. It's become a whole lot more sophisticated, and maybe most importantly, it's become completely invisible.
All right, let's talk about inflation. Now, most of us hear inflation, and we just think, oh, that means prices are going up. But the source we're looking at defines it very differently. It says rising prices are just the symptom, not the disease. The real cause, it claims, is the expansion of the money supply itself. That's the modern equivalent of the Romans mixing copper into their silver. Think about it. The more dollars that get created, the less each individual dollar is worth. Each one just buys a little bit less.
And this is really the core of the argument. The source doesn't frame this as some unfortunate economic side effect. No, it calls it a tax, an invisible tax on every single dollar you save, on all the cash you hold. Why? Because it just silently eats away at its value. And the craziest part about this tax, it never shows up on your pay stub, and nobody ever has to vote to approve it.
And when you look at the long-term effect, it's just staggering. I mean, get this. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the purchasing power of $1 US has dropped by over 96%. Let that sink in. What that means is something that cost you just $1 back then would cost you more than $25 today. Just wow.
You know, we spend so much energy worrying and talking about the taxes we can see, right? Income tax, sales tax, property tax. But all the while, this source argues, there's this invisible tax of inflation that's just constantly working in the background, chipping away at the wealth of every single person who holds the currency, whether they know it's happening or not.
Okay, so this all leads to the big question, the why. If this is really happening, then somebody has to be benefiting from it, right? And this is what the source calls the state's wealth transfer.
So what exactly is this wealth transfer? Well, the argument goes like this. When new money is created, it doesn't just appear in everyone's bank account at once. The first people to get their hands on it, think the government, big banks, large corporations, they get to spend it while prices are still low, while that money is still valuable. But by the time that new money finally trickles down to you and me, the rest of the economy is already adjusted. Prices have gone up. So in effect, your purchasing power has been silently siphoned away from you and given to those who got the money first.
So the source lays out a really clear divide here. There are winners and there are losers in this system. The losers, well, that's anyone who saves money or lives on a fixed income, because their money just buys less and less over time. And the winners, well, the biggest winner of all is the biggest borrower of all, the state. It gets to pay back its massive trillion-dollar debts with money that's worth a whole lot less than when they borrowed it.
And that right there, that's the ultimate why, according to this argument. The claim is that this whole system exists for one main reason. It allows the government to fund all of its spending. We're talking everything from social programs to massive military budgets without ever having to come to us, the public, and ask for more money through tax hikes. You know, the kind of thing that's super unpopular politically. It's basically a stealthy, backdoor way to fund the whole operation.
Okay, so let's put all the pieces together now. Let's recap this whole idea that the source refers to as the war on your wealth.
All right, so here are the key takeaways from the source's argument. First, inflation isn't some bug in the system, it's a feature, a policy tool. Second, this tool acts like a hidden tax that devalues the money that regular citizens like you and me hold. Third, this process systematically transfers wealth, your purchasing power, from savers over to the state. And finally, the whole thing, this whole complex modern system, is really just a high-tech digital version of the exact same trick the Roman emperors were pulling 2,000 years ago.
And so, that leaves us with one last, really provocative question. And this isn't a question for me to answer, it's one posed by the source material for you to think about. If this argument is correct, if your wealth, your savings, your hard-earned money really is in a constant silent war, what's your defense?